My name is Brooke Ellison. I'm 32 years old. And up until last month, I thought being the dependable daughter actually meant something. I thought it earned me a place, a seat, a warm invitation. Then I got a text, just a few words that shattered 2 decades of smiling through it all. We're having a quiet Thanksgiving with Heather's family this year. Maybe you could sit this one out. We need space. 6 words. That's all it took to unravel everything I had convinced myself was real. I just stared at the message. My heart didn't break. It twisted. My response? Just one word: enjoy. What they didn't know was that I had just bought a villa in southern France. And in 2 weeks, I'd be hosting the most unforgettable Thanksgiving of my life, with every family member they took for granted. Before I tell you how that day turned into something they'll regret missing for the rest of their lives, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you've ever been excluded from a family event, hit that like and subscribe. Trust me, you're not alone. Growing up, I was the textbook eldest child, driven, responsible, invisible. My parents, Joan and Mitchell Ellison, raised me with high expectations and even higher silence. I never rebelled. I never faltered. Straight A's, scholarships, a job that paid more than their combined income by the time I was 20. And still, I was background noise to the family star, my younger sister Heather. Heather was 5 years younger, and everything I wasn't, at least in their eyes. Soft, needy, adorable, and somehow always in trouble. When I was working nights at the campus library to afford college, they were paying her tuition in full. When I drove a used hatchback with no air conditioning, she got a brand new SUV for her sweet 16. I kept telling myself I was imagining it. "Brooke," my mom would say with a soft sigh, "you're just so strong. Heather needs us more." That word strong, it became a backhanded compliment. Code for, "You'll be fine, so we won't worry about you." When I graduated magna cum laude from Northwestern, they showed up, but left early to help Heather pack for a weekend trip. When I got promoted to director at my firm, our family dinner for me somehow became a brainstorming session for Heather's candle business launch. And still, I showed up. Holiday calls, emergency cash when Heather's fiancé lost his job, researching special schools when my nephew was diagnosed with dyslexia, birthday cards, housewarming gifts, babysitting, cheerleading, quietly clapping in the wings while she took every curtain call. But something shifted last year. After a decade of clawing my way up at Orion Innovations, I was promoted to executive vice president. Stock options, big office, big pay. For the first time, I had enough breathing room to do something bold, something for me. A villa, in France. I'd been dreaming about it since I studied abroad in Bordeaux, and when a historic stone house with its own vineyard went up for sale in Provence, I didn't hesitate. They didn't know yet. No one did. I was planning to surprise them at Thanksgiving with the photos, the deed, everything. But then they sent that text. The irony still stings. Last Thanksgiving, I had shown up early with imported wine, wearing the same hopeful smile I'd worn since I was 10. I even brought my then-boyfriend Daniel, hoping they'd finally see me, not just as the successful one, but as someone who had built a life worth celebrating. Instead, they sat us at the kids' table. Heather's in-laws, people they'd known for barely a year, got seats at the main table. Daniel laughed it off. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the same flicker I'd felt for years. When I announced my promotion over dessert, Mom blinked politely and said, "That's nice, dear," then immediately turned to gush about Heather's new PTA responsibilities. I'm not exaggerating. The PTA. Daniel broke up with me 3 weeks later. One of the reasons? He said he felt like a ghost around my family, and he couldn't watch me keep disappearing just to keep the peace. And still, I had been looking forward to this year, because this time, I had something big, something undeniable. The villa wasn't just real estate, it was a symbol, a declaration, that I mattered. But then, just 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, they sent that message: "We're keeping it quiet this year, just Heather's family." Just like that. No phone call, no conversation, no apology. As if I were a distant cousin, not the daughter who paid Heather's rent more than once, not the woman who'd helped raise their grandchildren in the background while Heather flitted from one crisis to another. I stared at the message on my phone for a long time. I didn't cry. Instead, I scrolled through years of texts. Christmas? Just gifts for the grandkids this year. My birthday? We might be a little late. Heather has a teacher conference. Even my small wins got filtered through the lens of Heather's life. And in that moment, I finally saw the pattern for what it was. This wasn't new. This was just the first time they'd been honest about it. I was still holding my phone when Dr. Lisa Warner's voice echoed in my mind. My therapist of 3 years. "What would happen," she once asked, "if you put your needs first for once, the way your parents always put Heather's?" Back then, I didn't have an answer. But now, my fingers hovered over the keyboard, drafting reply after reply, some bitter, some pleading, some surgical in their precision. "You want peace? Then stop asking me to fund your peace. I hope Heather brings her own wine, since mine never made the table. Next time you need help with her mortgage, forward it to your peaceful Thanksgiving guest list. But then, I stopped. I remembered something else Dr. Warner told me. You can't control their choices, only how you respond. So I deleted every word, took a deep breath, and typed just one. Enjoy. That word, it held more power than any monologue I could have written. It didn't beg, it didn't accuse, it didn't even flinch. It was peace, but on my terms. And as I pressed send, something in me unlocked. I wasn't just stepping back, I was stepping away from decades of trying to earn something that should have been freely given: love, respect, inclusion. They didn't know about the villa. They didn't know that while they were planning to microwave old traditions, I was sketching something new, something elegant, joyful, and unforgettable. That evening, I sat on my balcony overlooking the Boston skyline, notebook in hand, ideas pouring out like wine. Thanksgiving in Provence. I wrote it at the top of the page like a manifesto. Below it, a guest list, not of obligation, but of love. People who saw me, who cheered for me when no one else clapped. People who didn't ask me to dim my light for someone else's comfort. By midnight, I didn't feel rejected, I felt free, and more importantly, I felt ready. The next morning, I began making calls. First up, Aunt Vivian, my mother's older sister, and the one person who had always seen me, a retired psychology professor with silver curls and sharp instincts. She didn't need explanations, she just knew. When I told her what happened, how my parents asked me to skip Thanksgiving, her voice trembled. "Oh, Brooke, that's not just insensitive, that's cruel." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm done being heartbroken. I'm doing something different this year, and I want you there." I told her everything: the villa, the vineyard, the fireplace, the view, my dream come true. Her answer? "My darling girl, I'll be there with bells on. And may I say, I've never been prouder of you." That was all the encouragement I needed. I called my cousins next, Carson and Lila. Carson, a pediatrician in San Diego with twin toddlers. Lila, a landscape architect in Portland who used to send me birthday postcards when no one else remembered. "You're hosting Thanksgiving in France?" Lila squealed. "I'm in. Tell me what wine to bring." "What about your parents?" Carson asked carefully. "Do they know?" "They will," I said. "Eventually. Right now, this isn't about them." One by one, the RSVPs rolled in. Uncle Henry and Aunt Ruth booked their flights that night. Their college-aged daughters, Maya and Elise, shrieked when I sent pictures of the attic room with the exposed beams. Even Uncle Darren and his husband Alan, who usually spent holidays with Alan's family, moved mountains to attend. I wasn't just creating a new tradition. I was reclaiming my place as a daughter, cousin, host, and woman who mattered. And then, 3 days later, came the text that surprised me. From Tom, Heather's husband. "Hey, can we talk? It's important." I stared at Tom's message longer than I care to admit. We were never especially close, but he always noticed things no one else dared to name. At family dinners, when Heather stole the spotlight, Tom's glances would sometimes land on me with quiet recognition, like he saw it too. I called him back during my lunch break. "Hey, Brooke," he said, sounding nervous. "I heard you're not coming for Thanksgiving." "That's right." A pause. "Well, Heather doesn't know I'm calling you, and I'm not trying to cause trouble, but something about the whole thing doesn't sit right." I stayed silent, curious. "Your parents said you might want to skip this year, but I've seen them twist things before. Honestly, it just feels off, and I wanted to check in." For a moment, I was speechless. Then I said it plainly. "I bought a villa in Provence. I'm hosting Thanksgiving there. Most of the extended family is coming." Tom's response? He laughed. Loud, surprised, and completely genuine. "You're kidding. That's incredible. Wait, does Heather know?" "She doesn't yet. Neither do my parents." Then came the silence. They offered to help with Emma's school tuition, then pulled it back, said they need to start setting boundaries. Suddenly, they're experts on boundaries. I didn't say anything. He went on, hesitating. "Would there be room for us? The kids would love France. And honestly, Brooke, I'm not sure we can handle another Thanksgiving with them right now." My gut reaction? No. Heather had been the center of every table I was sidelined from. Did I really want her in this new space I had built for healing? But then another thought surfaced. One Dr. Warner had planted. Are you avoiding pain or creating peace? So I told Tom, let me think about it, and this time I meant it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, sipping lukewarm tea, weighing something heavier than luggage, the emotional risk of letting Heather in. Would she hijack the energy again? Would her problems soak up the oxygen, like always? Would my villa, the one place I'd built for joy, turn into another battleground for validation? I booked a last-minute session with Dr. Warner the next morning. Am I setting myself up to be ignored again? I asked, voice tight with doubt. If I invite them, am I just recreating the same pain in a prettier setting? Dr. Warner leaned forward, calm, clear. "What are you really afraid of?" she asked. "That she'll become the center again. That I'll fade into the background of my own holiday." She gave me a long look. Who made her the center all those years? I blinked. My parents. Every time, and this time, they wouldn't be there. This time, it would be my table, my rules, my celebration. And if I set the tone, maybe just maybe, Heather and I could relate without the shadow of comparison cast by our parents. So I called Tom back. "You're welcome to come. But Tom, this is my space. Heather needs to know that." There was a pause. "I understand," he said quietly, "and thank you. I think this could be good for everyone." As soon as I hung up, something inside me shifted again. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it for peace. Real peace, the kind you don't need to ask permission for. And for the first time in years, I looked forward to Thanksgiving. Not for the approval, not for the show, but for the freedom. The day before departure, I received one final message from my mother. "What time should we expect Heather's family? I'm prepping the pies." No mention of me, no acknowledgement of my absence. Just Heather. Just business as usual. I didn't reply. Instead, I finished zipping up my suitcase and shut my phone off for the next 10 hours. The flight from Boston to Paris felt like a soft exhale. 10 hours of stillness suspended above the Atlantic, between the life I had lived and the one I was claiming. When I landed at Charles de Gaulle, it was early Wednesday morning. The Paris air was sharp and cool, the sky blanketed with a soft gray that somehow felt like promise. I rented a car and began the 4-hour drive south toward Provence, rolling past fields of lavender gone quiet for winter, stone villages clinging to hillsides, and winding roads that smelled like earth and olives. I arrived just before sunset, and the villa, it was even more breathtaking than I remembered. 300 years old, stone walls still warm from the sun, a vineyard that rolled like a dream across the horizon, 5 bedrooms in the main house, each one kissed with French character, arched windows, old wood beams, wrought iron balconies. My favorite? The kitchen, a long farmhouse table, copper pots hanging from the ceiling, a fireplace big enough to roast a whole meal in. It smelled like rosemary and wood smoke, and something even deeper, belonging. My nearest neighbors, the Dubois family, came by to welcome me. They brought fresh goat cheese, a jar of fig preserves, and a bottle of local walnut liqueur. An American Thanksgiving in our little village, Madame Dubois said in French, grinning. "C'est très charmant." I thanked them with the best French I could manage and spent the rest of the night walking the vineyard under stars, making a mental note. This is the first place I've ever felt truly at home. By Friday morning, the villa was no longer just a quiet dream. It was alive. Aunt Vivian arrived first, her scarf flying behind her as she stepped out of the rental car like royalty in sneakers. With her were Carson and Lila, both bubbling with excitement and disbelief. "Brooke, this place is magical," Lila whispered, spinning slowly in the driveway. "You really did it." "I still can't believe you kept this from us," Carson grinned, hugging me tightly. "You always did play the long game." I smiled, overwhelmed by the simple fact they had come, for me. One by one, the rest arrived. Uncle Henry and Aunt Ruth with their girls, Maya and Elise, who ran through the vineyard like they were starring in a movie. Uncle Darren and Alan brought wine, lots of it, and immediately set up a tasting station near the fireplace. Within hours, the house hummed with laughter, footsteps, and the smell of simmering herbs and fresh bread. That evening, we shared a simple welcome dinner: coq au vin, crusty bread, soft cheeses, and just enough wine to make everything glow. We sat around the long wooden table, no phones, no tension, no one competing for space, and for the first time in my life, I felt like the center of something that didn't require me to shrink to fit. But just as the candles began to burn low, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. They were here. Tom's rental car pulled up slowly. The sun had just dipped below the vineyard, casting gold across the fieldstone and the olive trees. The doors opened. Emma and Jonah, 9 and 7, burst from the back seat. "Aunt Brooke," they shouted, sprinting toward me. I knelt, arms open, heart braced, and melted into their hugs. When I looked up, Heather was standing beside the car, expression unreadable. "Welcome to Villa Ellison," I said. She paused, then nodded. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you for including us." It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. That first night with everyone under one roof felt like the softest rebellion. No formal seating charts, no whispered judgments, no one tiptoeing around someone else's expectations. Just us, real, relaxed, raw. After giving the new arrivals a tour of the villa, the house burst to life. Emma and Jonah ran through the halls, thrilled with their attic bedroom, especially when they found out they'd be bunking with their older cousins, Maya and Elise, who promised to teach them French phrases and card tricks. Heather wandered room to room in silence, trailing her fingers across stone walls, pausing to take in the view from the balcony. When we circled back to the kitchen, she looked at me, not with defensiveness, but with something that felt like hesitation. "This place," she said. "It doesn't feel like you escaped. It feels like you arrived." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and passed her a glass of wine. Later, we all gathered around the farmhouse table. The lighting was warm, the wine poured generously, and laughter came easily. Uncle Darren played DJ with a Bluetooth speaker, mixing jazz with old-school soul. Carson told hilarious stories from his pediatric rounds. Aunt Vivian asked everyone to name one thing they were grateful for, just one. It turned into a 20-minute round of storytelling. There was no hierarchy here, no spotlight tug-of-war, just joy. When I looked up across the table, I caught Heather watching me again. But this time, when our eyes met, she didn't look away. Instead, she raised her glass. A small toast. Quiet, no words, but it landed like thunder. That night, I crawled into bed, exhausted in the best possible way. For the first time in my life, I had hosted a family gathering that didn't leave me drained or diminished. I didn't need a spotlight. I had something better, presence. And as I drifted off to sleep beneath old wooden beams and a French sky, I knew tomorrow would be Thanksgiving, and this time, it would be mine. Thanksgiving morning in Provence began with stillness, the kind of hush that only exists in old houses and open skies. I slipped out of bed before sunrise, pulled on a sweater, and padded into the kitchen barefoot. The stone floor was cool, the air crisp, and the scent of firewood from last night still lingered in the walls. I brewed coffee and stood at the window, watching golden light stretch slowly across the vineyard. This wasn't performative. This wasn't for approval. This was mine. The clatter of footsteps started slowly. Uncle Alan first, offering to grab fresh croissants from the village bakery. Then Aunt Vivian, tying on an apron before I could even offer her one. Soon the house filled with the kind of noise I had always longed for. Warm, familiar, inviting. Pajamas shuffled into the kitchen, hair tousled, laughter still half asleep, no one rushing, no one pretending. By 9 a.m. the villa smelled like coffee, cinnamon, and rosemary. We ate breakfast slowly. People leaned in, listened, passed dishes without fuss. It was everything our childhood holidays weren't. After breakfast, we broke into teams. Carson and Lila helped me with the main courses. Uncle Henry and Tom took the kids on a walk through the village for last-minute ingredients and to burn off energy. Maya and Elise set the harvest table, decorating it with lavender sprigs and paper turkeys the kids colored by the fireplace. Even Heather offered to help, folding napkins, arranging place cards with a surprising gentleness. As we worked side by side, she glanced over and said, "It's strange, I don't feel compared here." "That's the idea," I said quietly. She didn't reply, but I saw the truth land behind her eyes. All morning my phone stayed silent. No calls from my parents, no guilt-laced voicemails, just peace. And in that quiet, I began to realize I hadn't been exiled from the family. I had finally stepped outside of its shadow. Around 3 p.m., the kitchen buzzed with final touches, stuffing in the oven, mashed potatoes whipped, pies cooling on the windowsill like a painting. Lila was garnishing the green beans. Carson uncorked a bottle of wine. The house was glowing with purpose. Then, it happened. Ding, ding, ding. Multiple phones chimed at once. I glanced over. Aunt Ruth furrowed her brow. "It's your mom," she said softly, holding up her screen. Uncle Henry got one too. So did Aunt Vivian, all with variations of the same message. "Where is everyone?" "Heather's not answering. We're supposed to eat in an hour." Heather's face paled. She looked at me, wide-eyed. "They still don't know," Lila whispered, glancing at me across the counter. "They think we're all at home, scattered, detached." "They think you're alone," Carson added. I looked down at my phone. No new messages. "Of course not. They don't realize," I said slowly, "that this." I gestured to the bustling kitchen, the laughter in the other room, the smell of rosemary and roasted turkey filling every corner. "This is where the family actually is. Should we tell them?" Maya asked, standing in the doorway with a mixing spoon in hand. I thought for a moment. Part of me wanted to make it loud. Let them find out through a perfectly filtered photo on Instagram, the same way they made me feel unseen, casual, dismissive, an afterthought. But no, this day isn't about payback, I said. It's about freedom. Let's have dinner first. Then we'll decide. Everyone nodded. Even Heather. As we walked back to the dining room, she lingered beside me and whispered, "I should have told them where we were going. I didn't know how. I didn't want to hurt them." I looked her in the eye and said, "You don't owe them an explanation. Neither of us do." She blinked, took a deep breath and said, "You've changed, Brooke." "No," I replied. I just finally stopped shrinking. By sunset, the dining room at Villa Ellison looked like something from a storybook. A long wooden harvest table stretched beneath candlelight and laughter, decorated with linen runners, lavender bundles, and hand-drawn name cards. The French doors were open, framing a vineyard bathed in pink and gold, and there, around that table, sat a family. Not a perfect one, but a real one. We poured wine, passed dishes, and traded stories. The turkey came out golden, the stuffing fragrant, the kids proudly announcing which potatoes they had helped mash. There were no critiques, no one hovering, just joy. Before we began, I stood at the head of the table, unsure if my voice would hold steady, but it did. I just want to say thank you, not just for being here, but for choosing to be here. This isn't the Thanksgiving I grew up with. It's better. It's real. And it means more than I can explain. Aunt Vivian raised her glass, her eyes misting, to Brooke, for creating something none of us knew we needed, but now we never want to give up. Glasses clinked, smiles spread, even Heather whispered, to Brooke, as she tapped her glass to mine. We ate, we laughed, Uncle Darren told stories that made the kids giggle and the grown-ups tear up. Lila shared photos from a recent project in Morocco. Carson and I joked like we were 12 again, and then Heather said it. This is the best turkey I've ever had, she said loudly. Mom would be jealous. Everyone paused, and then laughter. Real, uninhibited laughter. It didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like honesty. For the first time, we weren't pretending. We weren't protecting our parents' feelings at the expense of our own. We were just being. As dessert was served, pumpkin pie alongside a French pear tart, Uncle Alan raised his glass again. I think we've just started a new tradition, he said. And looking around the table at the faces glowing in the candlelight, I realized they didn't just come for the villa. They came for me. And they stayed, because I let them see who I really was. Just as we cleared dessert plates and refilled coffee mugs, Maya called out from the fireplace. Aunt Brooke, your mom's calling Heather again. All eyes turned. Heather looked at me. I nodded. We both knew this moment had to come. She answered and put the phone on speaker. Hi, Mom. Her voice was casual, almost too casual. On the other end, my mother's voice crackled through, sharp with tension. Heather, where are you? We've been waiting for hours. Your father is beside himself. We're fine, Mom. We're having Thanksgiving. What do you mean? You're supposed to be having Thanksgiving with us. Where are you? Heather took a breath. A real one. Then she said it. We're in France, at Brooke's villa. The silence was instant, deafening, and then, confused, sharp, calculated. I don't understand. Brooke is in Boston. I stepped forward. No, I'm not. My voice was calm, steady, final. I'm here, Mom. In France. In my home. With the entire family. The whole family? She repeated faintly. Yes. Aunt Vivian, Uncle Henry, the cousins. Everyone's here. Except you and Dad. Silence again. Then her voice, tight, clipped. But we told you we wanted a peaceful Thanksgiving. I didn't flinch. You did. And we're having exactly that. She hung up. Seconds later, phones around the villa started lighting up. Calls, texts, missed FaceTimes. My parents were in full panic mode, trying to piece together how the narrative had slipped from their hands. We didn't answer. Not yet. Heather sat down beside me and whispered. That was a lot. I nodded. But I didn't feel shaken. I felt rooted. Out on the terrace, Aunt Vivian found me alone. You okay? She asked, handing me a glass of wine. I thought I'd feel triumphant, I admitted. But I don't. I just feel calm. She smiled. That's because this wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. And she was right. The celebration continued late into the night. Dancing in the living room. Old songs and new laughter echoing off stone walls that had witnessed centuries. But eventually, it quieted. Families settled into rooms. Dishes dried, fire dying low. And then, my phone rang. Dad. I stepped outside into the cold night air, heart steady, voice ready. Where is everyone? He asked. Not angry, just bewildered. Your mother is in tears. We're in France, Dad, I said plainly. At my villa, just like I told her. You have a villa? His voice cracked on the word, like he wasn't sure whether to be angry, impressed, or ashamed. Since last month. A long pause. Why would you do this? I didn't dodge. Because you told me to skip Thanksgiving. You wanted space, so I gave it to you. But we didn't mean this. We didn't mean for you to take everyone with you. I could feel it, the crack in his voice, the confusion of a man realizing the power he always assumed was quietly gone. What did you expect me to do? I asked gently. Eat alone? Pretend it didn't hurt? He sighed. It wasn't like that. Yes, I said calmly. It was exactly like that, and it's been like that for years. I told him the truth, not in anger, not for a fight. Just the truth I had carried quietly for 3 decades. The birthday dinners cut short, the ignored promotions, the way I was always expected to understand, but never to be understood. And for once, he listened. When I was done, he didn't argue. He just said, softer than I'd ever heard. I didn't realize how far it had gone. I know. And what now? He asked. What do you want from us? I want you to see me, I said. Not as Heather's sister. Not as the strong one. Just me. Brooke, your daughter. The line was silent. Then, we can try. It wasn't an apology, but it was a start. The next morning, the mist rolled gently over the vineyard, like a blanket pulled across the earth. I was already in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a coffee mug, mind replaying last night's call with Dad. Melanie, Heather walked in, holding my phone. It's been buzzing nonstop, she said softly. Mom and Dad, missed calls, voicemails. I nodded. I'll take it in the study. She handed it to me, but before I walked away, she added, if you want, I can sit with you. That caught me off guard. I'd like that, I said. We stepped into the small study overlooking the terrace. I called my parents. Mom picked up immediately. Brooke, finally, we've been trying to reach you. I know. I needed space, I said, echoing her own words from 2 weeks earlier. We need to talk about this, she continued, her voice tight. About what happened. You mean about how the entire family was together, and you weren't told? I asked calmly. Yes, she snapped. It was humiliating, hurtful. Do you know how hurtful it was to be told not to come to Thanksgiving? I said. To be told I wasn't wanted, not just for dinner, but for peace? We didn't mean it like that. You did, Mom, and it wasn't the first time. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I spoke the truth the way a surgeon makes a final stitch. Precise, necessary, permanent. For years, you've prioritized Heather's life, her struggles, her needs, and treated mine as side notes. I was always expected to understand, to be strong, to support quietly. And I did, but I'm done pretending it didn't cost me. The silence on the other end stretched. Then Dad's voice cut in. Put Heather on. We need to talk to her. Heather looked at me. I shook my head. She's here, I said. But you're speaking to me. Right now you're going to hear me. They hesitated, but didn't hang up. And then Heather did something I'll never forget. She reached out, placed her hand on mine and said into the phone, Mom, Dad, Brooke's right. I've seen it too. I've benefited from it. And it wasn't fair. I squeezed her hand. In that moment, everything shifted. Not because they suddenly understood, but because we did. After the call, we sat in silence. The kind of silence that isn't awkward, just full. Heather stared at the floor, then looked up at me. I'm sorry, she said, for not speaking up sooner, for enjoying the spotlight when it meant you were left in the dark. I let the words settle. It's not all on you, I replied. We didn't create the dynamic. We were just handed our parts. But you chose to step out of yours, she said quietly, and it made me realize, I want to step out of mine too. It wasn't an instant fix. It wasn't hugs and tears and everything solved, but it was real, and real was enough. The rest of the weekend passed in the kind of blur that only happens when you're not clinging to control. We visited a nearby chateau. The kids played hide and seek in the vineyard. At night, we gathered around the fireplace, telling stories, sipping wine, sharing long-held truths. Even Heather softened. I caught her laughing with Lila, helping Maya braid Emma's hair, even sharing a recipe with Aunt Ruth without needing to be the center of attention. She and I spent more time together in those 3 days than we had in years, not competing, not comparing, just being. When it came time to say goodbye, I felt something I'd never felt before during a family send-off. Peace. Heather hugged me tight. Thank you, she whispered, for including us, even when you had every reason not to. That's what family should be, I said. Not perfect, just willing. By the time the last car left down the gravel road, the villa felt transformed, not because of the walls or the wine or the view, but because of what we had built inside it. A new kind of bond, a new definition of family, and the quiet, radical power of choosing yourself first. Back in Boston, the air felt heavier. Same skyline, same office, same apartment, but I wasn't the same woman who had left. And my parents, they weren't sure how to act anymore. The following weeks brought small shifts, subtle at first. Our weekly calls, once dominated by updates about Heather's kids or Mom's book club drama, began to change. Tell us more about your client pitch, Dad said one day. I saw those photos of the villa. Brooke, it's incredible, Mom added another time. It wasn't perfect. Old habits still flickered, but for the first time, I didn't jump in to fill the silence, to rescue the moment, to smooth the discomfort. I let it sit, because silence is where people learn to listen. When I landed a major partnership at work, I told them, and they actually stayed on the call. No abrupt exits, no well Heather just walked in, no topic switches. They clapped, just for me. It felt strange, beautiful, like finally being handed the birthday card you were never sure they bought. As the next Thanksgiving approached, I sent invitations to Villa Ellison months in advance. This time I didn't wonder if people would come. They asked before I even sent the dates, and my parents, they RSVP'd yes with a note from Mom that said, "We know we have a lot to learn. Thank you for giving us the chance." When they arrived in France that November, it was different. No drama, no whispered corrections, no subtle comparisons. Just my mother, stepping into the stone kitchen with teary eyes and saying, "This is extraordinary, Brooke. You've built something truly beautiful. I'm proud of you." And she meant it. That second Thanksgiving at Villa Ellison felt like the quiet arrival at a long-dreamed destination, not because everything was perfect, but because everything was finally honest. The guest list grew. Close friends, chosen family, even my boss flew in for a day. But it never felt crowded. It felt full of people who weren't here out of obligation, but out of care. And my parents, they didn't hover. They didn't critique. They watched. They watched as I carved the turkey with steady hands, watched as Emma and Jonah called the villa Aunt Brooke's castle, watched as my cousins toasted to new beginnings and old wounds finally healing. At one point, Dad leaned over and said, "You've done something we never could. You brought the family together, Brooke, without losing yourself in the process." And I think, that's what I'd been waiting to hear my whole life. It didn't erase the past, but it softened it, and that softness felt like grace. Heather and I, we weren't best friends overnight, but we talked more, laughed more. There was no invisible scoreboard between us anymore, just two women learning how to be sisters in the absence of competition. That night, as the sun dipped over the vineyard and candlelight flickered across every smiling face at my table, I stood once more at the head, this time without trembling, and I said, "Last year this started because of rejection. But this year, we're here because of choice, because we know what love without conditions looks like, because we believe that peace doesn't have to mean silence, and that family doesn't have to mean pain." They raised their glasses, and I knew, without question, this was my table, my story, and finally, my seat. Not long ago, I thought love meant being the one who always understood, the one who showed up, the one who stayed quiet so others could feel big. But now, I understand something deeper. Sometimes the greatest act of love is not accommodation, it's truth. Sometimes the most peaceful response isn't silence, it's creation. That villa, it wasn't just a dream home, it was a line in the sand. It was where I stopped waiting for permission and finally chose myself. If you're watching this and you've ever felt like the background character in your own family, I see you. If you've been told you're strong, so strong that they forgot to ask how you're doing. If you've been asked to step aside just this once more times than you can count, let this be your reminder. You are not selfish for drawing boundaries. You are not dramatic for feeling hurt. You are not invisible. Sometimes we build new traditions not because we want to hurt others, but because we're finally ready to stop hurting ourselves. So I'll ask you now, have you ever had to create your own space? Walk away from the table that no longer fed you. Start again on your terms. Tell me in the comments. This space, this channel, it's here for you too. Like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to know. They have the right to choose joy, the courage to choose truth, and the strength to build a seed of their own. Because sometimes the most beautiful traditions are the ones we have the courage to create from scratch. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, peace doesn't ask permission. It walks in, opens the window, and starts setting the table anyway.